Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for joining. I am so excited to have this conversation with you all today about inclusive leadership. If you are passionate about inclusive leadership, drop a yes in the chat right now. I see a Byrd_R in here. Is that a family member, a cousin, relative? Who is that? I'm seeing some yeses come through. Love it. All right, Ashley, Glenn, Rachel, Brittany, Kimmy. While you're here, say hello in the chat. If you have not, I don't know, Byrd, we could be related now. We could be. But if you have not said hello in the chat, please feel free to do that and let us know where you're joining from. I want to make sure that not only are you all here to listen, but you're here to respond. I'm not here to talk to you. I'm here to talk with you. You are in for a treat within the next, 57 minutes. I'm going to be diving into inclusive leadership in action. No matter from where you are at your company, you can create the authority and the influence to lead from where you are. One of my most favorite quotes is by Simon Sinek, who wrote Start With Why. Has a great TEDx talk on Start With Why, but he says leadership is not a rank, it is a choice. So if you are here today, I believe that you are here because you are choosing to inclusively lead, no matter what your title, your role, your level, your function is. If you have a large team, you have a team of one, or if you are the team of one, okay, you can lead from where you are. So I want to make sure that you all leave with some clear actions that you can take back to your organization today and have these conversations with your teams, have these conversations with your manager to say, hey, it's time. The time is here, the time is now, and we need to really reframe and rethink about how we are choosing to create safe, equitable, and inclusive spaces for all of our people, okay? So let me just say this as well. I am going to really introduce to you all Perfeqta, my organization's inclusive leadership framework, for about 20-ish minutes or so. And then we're going to jump into a fireside chat with someone that I am really excited about today, who is phenomenal, one of the best Chief Diversity Officers to ever do it. She has graciously accepted my invitation to join us in a fireside chat to talk about all things inclusive leadership, inclusive environments, future of work. And so you all are in, again, for a treat. Okay, before I get too excited, I am going to introduce myself. If I have not had the pleasure of meeting you, it's great to meet you. My name is Latesha Byrd. I am the CEO of Perfeqta. Perfeqta, if you're wondering where in the world did this name come from, Perfeqta means performance, equity, and talent. Our goal is to help build high-performing teams and to put equity back into talent. So how do we do that? We really, truly believe at Perfeqta that an organization is not fully inclusive and equitable until the most marginalized person in the room feels emotionally or psychologically safe. So we support our client partners by providing workshops, learning opportunities around inclusive leadership, allyship, really building a practical and tangible, diverse and inclusive environments, right? We also provide consulting and advising to help our client partners launch employee resource groups, launch DEI committees, councils. We also create and build DEI strategic roadmaps. We are helping our clients build and create DEI strategies that are sustainable for the organization for years to come, right? Our goal is to make sure that any organization that we work with, that we help that organization really be in a better place than they were before Perfeqta came in and supported them. We also work in the business of culture transformation, right? Something that I am really passionate about as a leader is shifting the employer and employee dynamic to making a workplace environment less transactional and more transformational. And inclusive leadership is one of the vehicles that will allow an organization to do that. With that being said, I want to bring Natalie up to the stage, the virtual stage here. And Natalie, I'll let you introduce yourself. I'll say I've known Natalie for a few years now. And if you don't follow Natalie on social media, especially Instagram, please do that, because I am not even inspired by your leadership and the work that you do, but how you lead and how you show up as a leader and how you inspire so many other women, especially as a Black woman, to really fully own our careers, to feel empowered in our careers, to not just like make changes for ourselves, but to leave our workplaces better. And so if you could just share a little bit with our audience about you and your background, that would be great.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I see some familiar faces in the chat just from some DEI professional networks that I belong to. So hi back. But first, I have to say, Latesha, thank you for having me. And my hat goes off to you as well, because I truly believe that no matter where you do DEI, there's a role and there's a need for us on multiple fronts to be doing this work. So from someone internal to someone who's advising many companies, my hat goes off to you, and much respect. Latesha, I got to know you on social media, and again, right. I think real recognizes real, right? Like when you're doing this work, you recognize who else is doing it and doing it well and doing it from a good place as well. So my hat's off to you. Just to answer your question, I'm thrilled to be here. I've gotten many awards in my career, but I think being on a Perfeqta webinar is like the gold star of it all. So thank you for having me. A little bit about me professionally and personally. So as Latesha said, my name is Natalie Neilson Edwards. I am a chief diversity officer of a global company. This past year, I made the top 15 list, which was a big honor for me. Personally, I'm at a global energy company right now, but previously I've done DEI across industries. I've worked in global luxury cosmetics. I've worked in higher education, and I've worked in the federal government when I started my career doing HR consulting at Deloitte during the Obama administration. So for me, I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. I pride myself on being able to do DEI anywhere, because while industries have particular nuances and challenges, unfortunately, no matter where you work in corporate America, and I would argue globally, the challenges still remain the same. They just might take shape differently. And as Latesha mentioned, I'm also happy to come here today and talk a little bit about my thought leadership. As she mentioned, I started actually sharing career tips and advice on my Instagram in 2020, when my Instagram looked like a lot of other people, which is just pictures of my family and my dog. After George Floyd, I realized through my work, and I'd known this for a while, but it really dawned on me that, wherever I am, I can do this work. And that also includes online. And it really hit me as an epiphany that, Latesha, I'm sure you can relate. When we were starting out in our career, to get career advice, you had to hope to get on the radar of a senior leader. And if you were really lucky, you get on the radar and be mentored by someone in senior leadership who looks like you, which we all know was one person. And if it was two at your company, you were lucky. But no matter what they look like, they would have to, hopefully you'd invite them to coffee and they would accept, and it'd be on the calendar. And of course, it'd be 3 months from now because they're busy. And then in the 3 months, you better hope that the meeting wasn't pushed, canceled, postponed, or shortened to 15 minutes if you even had it, canceled the day of, because they're senior leaders. And if you get past all those hurdles, you go to coffee with them and maybe hear 30 minutes of wisdom that they were able to give you. And in 2020, when I saw a lot of people spending time on their phones for obvious reasons, it hit me that, and I wasn't even an executive at that point yet. It hit me that I had learned a lot from the people who had taken me under their wing and who had pulled me to the side, and that sponsorship and that mentorship and that wisdom that was given to me that I could share for people coming behind me, and they didn't even need to know me or get coffee with me to be able to take in that wisdom. So I started to share on social media, and now my Instagram is over 100,000 people following me for career advice. And I would say about 99% of them, Latesha, are women of color, or specifically Black professionals under the age of 40. So to me, I feel like more executives should be on social media. It shouldn't be seen as unprofessional. It should be as an extended platform for us to give back to people coming behind us who have not been given the privileges we've had of being in the right rooms at the right time to get that wisdom in the flesh. So that's, I'm coming here, I'm sharing all of that. And I know I'm going to hand it back over to you, and we'll talk in the fireside chat, but I'm sharing that because the answers I give today and the perspectives I give today are not just from a corporate platform of leading this work organizationally, but also from the direct insights of literally hundreds of thousands of people of which this work is supposed to impact, and what they think and what is resonating with them and what's not resonating with them, what's working in companies and what's not. And so all of us today as inclusive leaders or inclusive leaders to be can hear it both from the organizational level, but also the individual level as well. So happy to be here. And Latesha, the honor is mine.
Thank you so much. And you are getting some love in the chat. We love the tips you give on Instagram. And your Instagram it's so inspirational. It's so empowering. If I ever need to feel motivated, I'm like, let me go to Natalie's IG and see what she's talking about, but thank you for, again, your time and energy, and for being here, because there are so many different perspectives. Like you said, you can speak from, like, leading DEI at an organization, leading as a Black woman, and then providing the insights and the lessons that you've learned can help us all grow here today. And so I'm really excited. I am going to get through the slides as quickly as possible. I'm not going to rush it, but I'm really excited to get to our fireside chat. So what we're going to cover today, really 3 points here, is defining inclusive leadership and what it looks like in practice. Second, how people leaders can intentionally build a culture of belonging to retain top talent. And then third is how to use our framework here at Perfeqta. It's a 4A framework around an inclusive leadership continuum to incorporate these principles into your day-to-day work. I always like to start off with some stats here, and a couple that I really want to point out is that 45% of workers want their employer to have an active voice in moral and social justice conversations, right? So remember way back in the day where we couldn't talk about race, we couldn't talk about some of the societal issues at work. It was like can't do that, right? But now we're seeing that there is a shift in terms of what employees are needing from their employers, right? They want employers and companies to take a stance on social justice issues. They want their employer to make sure they are living their values out loud, right? Being able to talk about it. And then 34% say that they left their job because the company culture was not what was expected, and 32% are unsatisfied with company leadership. Let me ask you all this, and I want you to drop a yes in the chat if this has ever happened to you. Do you ever feel like you've been sold a dream during a recruiting process, talking to a hiring manager, and then you start at the company and you're looking around and you're like, this? How many times have we seen a company's website say, we love all our people, we recognize all diverse perspectives and backgrounds, but then you get in the workplace and you're like, where's the diversity at? You said you valued all people, but when I speak up and I give you my feedback, why is it being met with silence? Why is it being met with questions, right? Why is it being met with, you should just be happy to work here, right? Y'all are getting quiet in the chat, so I'm gonna have to dial it back a little bit. I know you're probably like, all right, I'm not saying at your current company, I'm just saying in general. I know I have experienced that. At Perfeqta, we have done a lot of focus groups with companies, and employees have said, this is not the culture I expected. And really, the reason why inclusive leadership is important is because you can have all the fancy great places to work awards, right? You can have your DEI mission statement, your definitions. You can list all of that on your website. But when it comes down to the people and how the people are feeling valued, are they being seen? Are they being heard for who they are? That starts with the individual. That starts with the people on your team. That starts with the leaders you report to. That starts with how you lead. Right? The question becomes, how can I be more inclusive, and even how I am leading or driving momentum for inclusivity at my organization? So what is inclusive leadership? So if you have downloaded our inclusive leadership guide, you may have seen this already. But I do want to ask you all to download it. We'll drop a link in the chat soon so you can take a look at that. But we have the six C's, or the six competencies of inclusive leadership. Now at Perfeqta, we truly believe that to make sure that you have great leaders for leaders of tomorrow, for the future of work, that inclusive leadership needs to be a core leadership competency just within leadership. Again, when we think about a good leader, does that mean that they're being an inclusive leader? And Natalie and I are going to dive into that a bit more during our fireside chat. Just because someone is a good leader, does that mean that they are actually being an inclusive leader? Being an inclusive leader is really now a requirement. It is a must. If an organization wants to retain their best talent, we have to make sure that our leaders are being set up to be confident, to be comfortable, to be challenged, and how they are inclusively leading. So as you look at inclusive leadership now as a core leadership competency, let's dial into that a little bit specifically with these 6 C's. The first one is critical thinking. You're able to see a situation from different views and identify different approaches. Something that we often talk about in our allyship or our bias workshops at Perfeqta is you must be able to look around the room, whether it's a Zoom room or the folks that maybe you're in the office, take a look at the people around you and just recognize the different identity groups that exist. I'm not going to get into this too much today, but if you bring us in for a workshop, you'll hear this. Each identity group has a social dominant group. The groups or the identities that don't belong to a social dominant group are the groups that are more marginalized, that are dealing with corporate marginalization, that are dealing with exclusion. They're having to navigate a lot more biases and microaggressions than the average person. Also, based on those identities, they have different life experiences. There's different systems of oppression that exist that really can hold those individuals back, right? Think about all the isms, right, in the world: racism, sexism, heterosexism, ableism, and the list goes on. But when you are an inclusive leader and you're critically thinking about the differences that exist within your team, you're recognizing that, one, everyone has different life experiences that they're bringing to the table that's impacting how they show up. But the positive here is that they also have different views. They have different approaches. And how are we embracing those differences, acknowledging and recognizing those differences that do exist, and making sure that everyone feels valued for the differences that they bring to the table? So this is also about embracing diversity of thought. The next one is collaboration. You understand that diverse backgrounds and ideas move the group forward. You don't want your team environments to suffer from groupthink. I was reading a case study about a leader who whenever a team would be in a meeting talking about an idea, if everyone really just held on to that one idea that was being shared and there was no disagreement at all, the leader would say, you know what? We are going to schedule another meeting, and I want everyone to come with a different thought or a different viewpoint and really think about this on a deeper level. So understanding that having diversity of thought, it is what is going to help your teams be more innovative, creative, and move forward. Consciousness, you're self-aware and you're actively working to build a culture of we instead of me. Being a conscious leader means that you are aware of your own personal biases and assumptions you're making. You're working to confront those and challenge those head on. But you are also not centering your own experience at the workplace as the only experience that your colleagues or team members may be experiencing. Recognizing that my experience is not the only experience, right? I have my experience here, but that does not deter or dictate my colleagues' experience, who may be experiencing the workplace a bit differently. Cultural intelligence. You demonstrate an advanced level of awareness of cultural identities and sensitivities across the organization. Whether you have an overlap in those identities or not, right? I do not have kids. I have a cat named Nipsey, so I'm a cat mom. But I don't know what it's like to drop my child off at school and have that fear of what we've been seeing in society, right? I don't have to name it, right? I can still have a certain level of empathy and grace and understanding and awareness, whether that is my experience or not. So if you are culturally intelligent, right, you're going to demonstrate an advanced level of awareness of other experiences, whether it's yours or not. Communication, you're keeping the appropriate stakeholders in the loop as often as possible, and you take them along the journey with you. Being an inclusive leader is about being able to show up and be vulnerable, to communicate. I don't know everything, but I am here. I am open. I'm willing to learn. I may make some mistakes, but I am going to jump right back on it and I'm going to keep things moving. And oftentimes at Perfecta, what we hear from our employees at the companies we support is we really want our leadership team to just be transparent, to just communicate, to just show up, right? Communication is a great way to demonstrate verbally your commitment to DE&I. And then compassion. You lead with empathy and understand how to be a role model for inclusive behavior. So you're not just talking about it in the communication piece that I mentioned, but you're also being about it. And you're being a role model for others. Natalie, to put you on the spot here, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to share or anything you want to add, or, feel free to chime in here.
Sure. I love all 6 of these competencies, but I wanted to just underscore what you said, Latesha, with like, if I can get a t-shirt that says that inclusive leadership is the bare minimum, I would somebody print that for me, right? Because I think the issue that we keep running into, I know we'll talk about this later in the fireside chat, or at least I hope to, is that unfortunately, despite great thought leadership and despite leadership from many people in DEI and outside of DEI, sometimes organizations still believe, even at the leader level, that my job is to be a leader and the inclusive bit is an add-on. It's like sprinkles on the ice cream cone instead of, no, no, no. If you're not being an inclusive leader, you're not leading. Period. And I think we need to catch up with where we are in time, which is inclusive is no longer a prefix to leadership. It just is leadership. And I long for the day that more organizations started reflecting that in performance reviews of leaders, right? Where if you can't demonstrate inclusion, that's points off the board instead of you hitting your objectives. And if you're inclusive, that's extra credit. We have to shift that narrative. So I'm glad you have these 6 competencies, and I hope to see that embedded more in the behavior day to day of leaders across industries.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that too. And y'all, if your organization has added any type of inclusivity, inclusively leading D&I to your core competencies in your performance management process, kudos to you for doing that. And if your organization is not doing that, that is an opportunity there to discuss. I want to ask you all this before we move to the next slide. Out of the 6 C's here, which of the 6 C's really resonate the most with you? Just drop whichever one resonates with you the most in the chat. And I'll wait for those responses to come through. Compassion, collaboration. Hey, Nadia. Cultural intelligence, consciousness. Yes. I feel like some of y'all just want to say all the above. Yes, 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 yes. Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Perfecta's 4A framework for inclusive leadership. As I am going through each of these, I want to encourage you all here to really be thinking about, where am I on this continuum? Where is my leadership team on this continuum? And what does it look like to really evolve from 1A to the next? The first one is appetite. There is a desire to learn, grow, and shift your individual mindset in order to be more inclusive. Maybe recognize that there are some gaps. I'm not sure what those gaps are, but there are some gaps. Or I really want to understand the experiences of the people that I work with day to day. So there is an appetite, there is a thirst for knowledge and learning and growth. That is the first step to getting to becoming an inclusive leader. Once you get that appetite up, the next one is awareness. You're starting to build knowledge and perception of who you are. You're really starting to build your own level of self-awareness. You're reflecting on your experiences. You're understanding how my experience has shaped my thinking. It has shaped my assumptions. It has shaped my biases. Maybe there are certain folks that I've been judging because of a bias that was ingrained in me from a young, early age, right? And how this contributes to your interactions with others. You're recognizing that you have some work to do. Awareness really takes a lot of self-reflection and introspection. And then once you build that awareness, the next one is action. Taking the necessary measures to move beyond learning and understanding to change behaviors. You know what? I have recognized that I do have an assumption or a stereotype against this specific group of people, and that is impacting how I'm communicating with them at work, how I'm treating them when I am giving them feedback, when I'm doing their review, right? When I'm making decisions on who to give special projects to, am I giving it only to the person who looks, talks, sounds just like me? Or am I recognizing that there might be a bias there? When you move into action, you're undoing, you're recognizing the unlearning that you need to do, and then you are acting in new ways. You're practicing new behaviors so that you can lead more inclusively. And then the last A here is accountability, owning and accepting responsibilities for your actions and remaining open to feedback that pushes you towards inclusive practice. Accountability is really hard, especially self-accountability. If you can get away with just giving that high visible project to your favorite person at work, whether they are the best person for the role or you know someone else over here is being underlooked, right? If you're not being held accountable for that, it is easy to fall back into old patterns and habits. But an inclusive leader is going to hold themselves accountable. An inclusive leader is going to ask others to hold me accountable. You're going to ask for feedback, and you're going to own that I might make some mistakes here, but that's okay. As long as you fix those mistakes, right? We really want to see leaders move from the appetite all the way to accountability. So I hope that this continuum really gives you just a framework to think about when you're looking at yourself or the people around you and you're thinking, how can we move forward in our inclusive leadership? You're not going to hold yourself accountable if you don't even have the awareness of how you can do better. You're not going to take action if you don't even have the appetite to learn and grow. So we love this framework. We're going to be talking a lot about this in the next few months and in our workshop. So sit with this, y'all, think about it some, and let me know how this really resonates, even, beyond today. So how can you apply this framework to your day-to-day work? Participate in workshops, discussions, or programs to gain a deeper understanding of what triggers your biases and how to combat them. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations, right? Put yourself in uncomfortable conversations that will require you to think deeply about how deeply you're thinking. The next is reflect after every learning opportunity. After our allyship workshops at the end, what I always ask our participants is I want you, before you go into a meeting, to think about how I can be more inclusive, how I can demonstrate my allyship. And then once that meeting is over, take notes or debrief with yourself on how you were able to do that. Again, it takes a daily self-reflection and introspection action here to make sure you are growing as an inclusive leader. Listen closely to the people around you to learn about their backgrounds, cultures, and work experiences. Something I often say is, it's not just about the work, right? At the end of the day, it's about the people. People are doing the work. So if you're showing up to work and you're just making it about the work and you're forgetting that people exist behind the work, people exist behind the laptop, the keyboards, you're really missing out on an opportunity to create an inclusive environment and to help other people feel emotionally safe and that they belong. And then build meaningful relationships with the people around you who come from different communities and backgrounds. You're going to learn so much about different cultures. It's going to open you up to really just having a better and deeper understanding of the world around you that exists beyond your own world. And you're going to become that culturally intelligent leader by being open to the connections that you may have not always really acted on or focused on building. With that being said, let's move into a couple of more. Be transparent with your team when you make mistakes. Explain where you went wrong and what you're doing to correct mishaps. Create space for people to share feedback on what the leadership team needs to improve within the organization. Something that we often see at Perfeqta is when leadership teams don't say anything at all because they're scared of saying the wrong thing. There is this fear of saying the wrong thing. And then the employees are left with wondering, does leadership truly care about DEI at the company? So be transparent. Be transparent. Sometimes your people aren't looking for you to get it right. They're just looking for you to be open, to be willing to learn, and to own what you don't know in the areas in which you're growing and seeking knowledge. Maybe you should think about connecting with an executive coach, and also just setting your own personal KPIs that you can monitor over time to track your progress. On that last A, which I believe is the most important A in the framework, is accountability. So as I close out here and shift to our fireside chat, here are some ways to hold yourself accountable. Communicate progress with your team. Let your team know your goals and your plans for moving forward as an inclusive leader. Encourage them to share feedback. Recognize and celebrate individual and team successes. I've already mentioned this, and Natalie doubled down on this earlier. Add inclusive leadership competencies to your performance reviews. And then also think about connecting with an executive coach to talk through obstacles and develop a clear action plan to get realigned on priorities. As we close out here, key takeaways. Inclusive leadership is the key. It is the way to lead for the future. It will lead to your team being more productive, more engaged, embracing diversity of thought will bring that innovative, really thinking nature, and openness to receiving new ideas to your team. Developing those skills requires you to have an appetite, gain awareness, take action, hold yourself accountable, and the tactics you use to keep track of priorities in other areas of the business can be used to hold yourself accountable for becoming an inclusive leader. So thank you for joining this part of the webinar. I want to encourage you all to download our Inclusive Leadership Guide. Gabby, if you could drop the link to the guide in the chat, that would be great. And then at this time, we are going to bring up Natalie for our fireside chat. If you all have questions, please drop those questions in the Q&A. There is a Q&A function. So drop your questions there in the Q&A box. I have a couple of questions, but I do want to make sure that you all have time for questions as well. Great. So, Natalie, my first question is about your experience being a Chief Diversity Officer. Can you give some examples of how you've seen leaders really integrate inclusive leadership into their day-to-day work, and what were some of those outcomes?
Amazing question. And Latesha, I'm so in awe of your framework. I absolutely love it. And I'm hoping more organizations take it on and work with you.
Thank you.
Because there's nothing I saw in there that I wasn't saying like preach really loudly in my head. So kudos for you for that. But great question. I'll start by just kind of walking you through, because I think we can't answer this question unless we also talk about where the role of a DEI officer has been through, right? And where it is currently.
Yep.
Often, when I started my career doing DEI work 10 plus years ago, we were in a completely different space than we are now. And I think many of us know in the audience that since 2020 and George Floyd specifically, the role of DEI has rapidly changed. And I'm arguing that right now it's even changing again, sometimes even taking a step back, which is unfortunate at many organizations. But for the majority of my career, the role of the diversity person, which is very common, let alone team, is you often got you did everyone else's job, but with the diverse in front of it. So put the word diverse in front of someone else's job, that was your job. So you had a head of recruiting, but it was your job to think about diverse recruiting. You had a head of compensation in HR, but diverse compensation meant looking at equal pay, looking at pay disparities, right? You even on the business side, if you were running a business, and so you were the president of a business, thinking about our business from a diverse lens was the diversity person's job. So how are we making products and services for diverse consumers, multicultural markets? How is it having, impact in our industry for different people? So that was the foundation of the work. And that's, I think, why we're seeing so many people in DEI DEI burnout is real, because you're essentially doing everyone else's job for a population that has been ignored this whole time. So when we think about inclusive leadership, and you and I both argue that inclusion is a core competency, that is, I think, what every diversity officer, let alone diversity professional, has been saying for a long time, right? Because at the end of the day, it's a core competency. And I think, to answer your question, there's a difference between somebody in the business approaching me as a partner and approaching me to delegate, right? And I think that's what separates strong companies with great cultures that are on a quest to be as inclusive as possible, and companies that will always kind of stay at level one. Because at the individual business leader level, whether that's in the business or whether that's in HR or any function of the company, are you approaching the diversity team to add on to the work that you already do? Or are you doing the work to think inclusively, bare minimum, as the basic standard, and you're inviting the diversity team to come in and help you execute what you already want to get done with them?
Yes.
Or to advise you personally on how to do that inclusive work even better.
Right.
And there's two different lanes, I think. And I hope I can speak for all diversity professionals, but we prefer the shoulder to shoulder. We're not here to, you call us and we handle it for you, because that's not how organizations change. If you're a diversity officer, like, for example, I just had my first child, I'm on maternity leave. I've always said, that if your diversity officer has to take vacation or has to go on a sabbatical and diversity stops, then we're not changing the company. I should be able to take a step back and diversity keeps moving. And that's what I've aimed to do at every organization that I work at. And I always have also said, I know I'm doing my job when diversity is raised in a meeting and I'm the one who didn't make the point, right? So at the end of the day, it's really, really important that all of us as leaders, and you in the audience, no matter what part of a business you work in, are you bringing up DEI? Are you recommending solutions? Are you rolling up your sleeves? Or are you waiting for the chief diversity officer to do it? Do you even have a head of diversity at your organization? Because I do believe that's a very needed role. I know I'm biased, but I've also seen organizations where there was no one in that position and it was everybody's job, and therefore it was nobody's job. So I think the sweet spot is when you have someone in the role to move the company forward and provide the expertise and direction, which I'll talk about later, in addition to everybody taking that guidance and putting it into action on a daily basis for the area of the business that they work in.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you said that really inclusive leadership is the bare minimum. Bare minimum. That should be a non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable.
Yeah. Especially as we're shifting into 2024. It should be a non-negotiable. So my question for you now is, I know that you are on the C-suite, right? You're working directly with C-suite leaders. So how do you see the C-suite really integrating inclusive leadership into even how they're building equitable and inclusive environments?
Well, to answer that question, I'll tell you how to tell if they're not, right? Because I think the question is, how should they, as C-suite leaders, promote and model inclusive leadership? And I think a way we talked about that with your framework, but I think what's even more helpful for everyone listening is to deduct if you're not doing it, what that looks like. I always tell people that the diversity office is the GPS, not the driver. And where organizations, I believe, and again, I've worked in many industries, I've also chaired organizations and professional networks of diversity professionals from a slew of, so I'm not even talking from my own personal experience, I'm talking about what I've heard from my peers in industries I haven't even worked in yet personally. Where organizations trip up and mess up is they think that the chief diversity officer is the driver of the car, right? No, we're the GPS. My job is to tell you, here's the destination, turn left, turn right, here's how you go. Oh, you made a wrong turn, turn around, recalculating, right? Back in the day when you had little MapQuest directions, now we have it on our phone, Waze. Okay, I am the Waze. You are the driver, especially as the C-suite, period. Because when you get into senior leadership, your job is to move the company forward and make decisions that results in us getting to the destination. My job as chief diversity officer is to make sure you know where you're going and you know the best and fastest way, most effective way to get there. But the Waze does not take control of the car and turn it, right? Somebody has to be there. And I think where we really are seeing negative results with DEI, even with the most competent and effective and incredible chief diversity officers, the company doesn't move forward. And I can tell you from thousands of miles away, I don't have to be internally to know where the breakdown is. No one is in the driver's seat. And sometimes the chief diversity officer is expected to be the GPS, the driver, and build the car.
And build the car, and fix the car, and change tires. And
change tires. Make sure there's gas. Maybe it's an electric vehicle. Maybe, we love that. But and make sure the kids in the back have snacks. Right?
And the seat belts are on, they're strapped in the car seats. I mean, the whole nine.
Make sure the music is popping. Okay, make sure the AC is blaring. We're expected to do everything, and organizations sometimes will even buy the car, so to speak, and then look up 2 years later and say, why is it still in the garage collecting dust? And that is where we're having these critical conversations in many organizations today of what is the expectation of a great chief diversity officer and what did we hire them to do? And when you look at those tasks that we had in our head when we were interviewing them and trying to find someone for the role, we as non-DEI leaders in the organization failed to connect that with what I need to do. Right? So I think what we need to understand is how our behavior needs to change, right? So many organizations treat chief diversity officers like, forget my metaphor, but almost like a house cleaning service. Someone comes in, tomorrow and cleans my house, and now I have a clean house. Conversely, my husband and I are trying to, not remodel our house, but just kind of organize it and fix it up. And one of our good friends is a designer, and she walked into the house and said, listen, I'm going to interior design your house. But in order for this to work, you have to change your behavior, right? You can't just put the mail here anymore because there won't be a table. You can't just leave your shoes out by the front door. And so that was a little, it hit us because it's we can't just have these Pinterest beautiful living room and kitchen and guest room. We have to change how we exist in these rooms if the design gonna work. And so chief diversity officers, we think about, we meaning leaders that are not the diversity person, we think she gonna come and she gonna clean the house and it's gonna be beautiful. I get to come back into my house at the end of a workday and it's spick and span. Instead of, I have to change how I operate in this space so it stays clean.
Right. And
I have to that being said, as tools to actually clean the house.
And it's a daily practice, right? It's a daily practice. You have to be intentional every day about putting things away, right? You can't leave your
Exactly.
shoes at the door.
And that's what we're seeing now. I think 3 years post George Floyd, unfortunately, we see a lot of my peers who were never allowed to clean in the first place, or
Mhm.
even if they did make progress, nobody changed their behavior where they put their shoes. And
Yes,
so now we need to start from square one again, because all the cleaning that person did, you just outdid with your daily
right.
actions that weren't prioritizing inclusion as change
Exactly.
behavior. The last thing I'll say, and I see this happen all the time, and I always hold people accountable gently and with love, any organization with this. Leaders also, our job, just as senior leaders, no matter what part of the business you work in, we are responsible for the organization. We have to be enterprise leaders, meaning we have to think about where the organization is going, not just my job in the organization, but I have to represent the organization. With DEI, I see this mistake over and over again. You ask a leader, you ask a CEO, you ask a C-suite leader, you ask any senior leader, quite frankly, VP and above, I would argue, what have you personally done to advance DEI? And you'd be amazed. The answer, with good intent, 9 times out of 10 comes out in organizational language. Well, the company is doing X, Y, and Z. We at insert company name are so happy to be doing X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
Sir, ma'am,
Yes.
colleague, that's not the question I asked. I asked what you are personally
Personally
doing.
doing.
And again, I say that they're saying that with positive intent. They take pride in what the company is doing. And as a senior leader, we have to kind of speak plurally a lot
Yes.
because we are the company. We don't get to say, well, that's not my part of the business, right? Like, we are a team. But at the same time, I think with diversity, equity, and inclusion, the way it turns a corner in an organization is if you can role model what are you personally doing. At the
Love
company
that.
I work, we moved to put that in people's performance reviews.
Mhm.
And on an all hands call, somebody asked the CEO, what is your performance objective this year when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because now everybody has an option to add a diversity goal personally. And it was a powerful moment. And he answered the question, he answered it well, but you
Oh,
could
good.
kind of tell that people weren't expecting such a direct question to leadership. And to me, that was a learning moment for everybody of like, your job is not just to encourage everyone else to have a diversity objective. You need to be able to go in there and say, what am I going to do differently?
Right.
And I think once more people do that, like I said, with the clean house,
Yes.
we're the organization consultant, and we put our shoes in a different place and we learn to break habits and do something new so we can maintain, because anybody can have a diverse and inclusive organization for
Mhm.
30 days.
Right. Love that. Love
But
that.
is this the new normal? Yes. Then we have to change our behavior.
Yeah. Role modeling all the way. Thank you for that. Behavioral change, that's the key. Exactly, Glenn. Thank you. Couple of questions in the Q&A, y'all. Drop your questions in here. We do want to get them answered. Ashley has said, is there any way we can share the 6 competencies within our organizations with your trademarking and citation? Please feel free to share it. Reach out if you have any questions about it. Let us know how the conversations go and how we can support you. But this is why we're putting this information out into the world, is because we want to help you with having these conversations. And so feel free. That's what it's here for. We are here to be a resource to you. Okay. The next question I'm going to ask here is, we know that education and awareness are 2 big components of becoming a more inclusive leader. How can people managers develop a better understanding of the unique challenges and perspectives of historically marginalized employees to make more equitable decisions?
I love that question, Latesha. I'm laughing because when I, it's not because it's funny, but because I think about, you know, when I was coming up, I won't say my age, but when I was coming up, Destiny's Child was all the rage. And, the song, say my name, say my name. I always tell that in the company I work at, in my DI education, particularly with inclusive leadership. Why? Because I believe that personally, and this isn't trademark or anything, people can steal it, but in my life and in my professional experience, I have seen a very clear link between, we're talking about allyship, really, right? If you don't belong to a historically excluded group, you have to understand their experience in order to be an ally and make change. And I believe allyship, a lot of times what happens is allyship is driven by empathy, which is what you're asking about, and empathy is driven by exposure. It's very hard. You can have sympathy, but it's hard to have empathy, which is really putting yourself in someone's shoes, unless you know what that looks like. And you can only know what that looks like if you put yourself in a situation to observe it, right?
Absolutely.
And so exposure leads to empathy, which leads to allyship a lot of the time. And so to me, your question about how can inclusive leaders think about inequitable outcomes for different groups and drive change, to me, many leaders can talk, as I said, about DEI organizationally, but can't name 5 Black people in their department of
Yeah,
thousands.
right.
And these are senior C-suite people at organizations I've worked with across industries. You can ask someone, can you name 5 Black people or 5, you know, Latina women or 5 people with a disability? And I don't even need their positions. I just need to know their first name.
Yeah.
And the amount of stuttering, the amount of, oh, you're right. And it's a cognitive dissonance because they can't come up with it. Right. But I guarantee you, if you ask, can you name 5 people from a dominant group, they'd be able to give you 20 people's names, right? And
Right.
again, that's unfortunately where we are with non-diverse teams and many organizations and things like that. But as soon as you start talking about, and I'm not asking you to name 5 left-handed people who have gluten-free diets. I'm asking you to name,
Yeah.
in many cases, visibly observable diversity characteristics, right? And to me, I always say that privately or as a challenge, because not for tokenization or anything like that, but just to make them aware of just how are you going to name someone's experience if you can't even name them?
Yeah.
If you aren't even aware or alert enough to notice,
Mhm.
oh, this is so and so, this is the diversity they bring. This is so and so, this is the diversity they bring. And you lead thousands of people, that's a problem. And so again, we get into this place of being able to talk about these theoretical realities, which are very important. We know in general, research shows that people of this demographic experience this in the workplace. We read the research reports, we read the articles, which is lovely. That is also a part of, to your point, awareness of inclusive leadership. But until it becomes personal to you,
Yes.
it's very hard to have empathy, and it's very hard to then be an ally. And so, and which is when you're a leader, is what you have a platform and the privilege of doing, driving institutional change, right? There are hierarchy in organizations for a reason, because people tend to have more platform, more power, and more privilege with the higher you rise. And so to me, my answer to your question in terms of what people can do is get to know people. Start with the name. If you haven't seen the demographics of your department, ask HR to pull that for you. They can usually do that, wiping off people's identities. So you can just see where you are. What does the data show, right? What are the strong groups in terms of representation? What are the very low groups, and what's in the middle? Also mentor. Once you know people, make it a point to get exposure. Join the ERG at your company, even if you don't belong to that affinity. Then you can build empathy and also seek to be mentored,
Yes.
right? Because you don't have to be in a formal reverse mentoring program that many companies have, but in mentoring relationships, sometimes as leaders, we focus on what we can tell others.
Yeah.
And we
Absolutely.
forget to build the intimacy and the psychologically safe relationship where we can ask questions as
Yes.
well. And even not even asking questions, just listening,
Yes.
right? I'm not telling you to go and find a Black person at your company and interview them about their experience. It's not what I'm telling you, but being around people and building that relationship allows you to listen to their experiences on a day-to-day basis and ask yourself, would you have to go through that?
Yes.
That's when you start to understand, and that's when the empathy grows and becomes action.
Yes. Yes. I love that so much. Round of applause. I'm over here clapping. um, we at Perfecta talk a lot and have talked a lot about allyship. And I love that you mentioned allyship, because if you're able to being an effective ally, in order to do that, you must have empathy. To have empathy, it requires a level of exposure. That level of exposure is going to require you to build meaningful relationships and connections with people that you may not always have, that close proximity to. So sometimes you may have to go out of your way, and that's totally okay. And you definitely should. And so we've done a lot at Perfeqta talking about allyship, but inclusive leadership is really important because inclusive leadership is, again, a core leadership competency for the leaders of tomorrow. How can you take your allyship and go beyond that to really effectively create transformational change within the culture of your org? With that being said, we have 2 questions in Q&A. We have 2 minutes left, so this is going to be like what do you call it? A
Lightning round.
yes,
I'm
lightning
terrible.
round. It's like I
Well,
listen to
Latesha, talk.
I listen to so many podcasts, and I'm like, what do they call it at the end? Where they're like, okay, lightning round, yes. Jericho asked, in starting my journey to DEI, I noticed many organizations view it as a project with specific outcomes. How can we ingrain this in the culture? That question is so good, but I want to pass it to you to see what your thoughts are on it. 1 minute.
My 10-second answer is people usually, okay, I guess I just surrendered 5 of those seconds. I read a quote recently that said that strategy doesn't drive culture, what you reward drives culture. Human beings tend to do what they know is going to bring them a reward. And I know it won't solve all problems, but bare minimum, ask yourself if inclusion not only helps people perform better at the company, like with their bonus, with their performance rating, but also ask yourself the flip side, which you talked about before. If they don't do inclusion, do they take a hit?
Yep.
Right? In the 8th grade, if we had an 88% and we wanted to get an A, which was a 90, we had to do extra credit, right? But what we need to do, instead of treating inclusion like that at companies, you have an 88 and I'm noticing you haven't done inclusion, which means if you don't do it, you're going to get a 79.
Yes.
And I don't mean to say inclusion should be a punishment, but what I'm saying is any company, there are things you have to do bare minimum. And if you don't do these things, there is a punishment, right? Because it's been embedded in, if you're not doing this, you're not meeting your leadership competencies, you're not meeting your expectations. And I feel like inclusion is still, if you want extra credit, here's how you become an inclusive leader, instead of saying, we notice you haven't done X, Y, and Z. Why? Yeah. In many companies, there's more of a punishment for not finishing your e-learnings than there is for you to not be an inclusive leader, and that needs to change.
There we go. And if I can add one thing to that too, another quote that another CDO told me last week is, the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. And so yes. What are we accepting? How are we holding folks accountable, right? Natalie, thank you so much. I know we're at our time. Rosalind, you sent us a question. Please email me. The email is in the chat here. If you all are interested in learning more about what we do at Perfeqta, please reach out to us, info@goperfecta.com. Go to our site. We have a resource center with a bunch of blogs. We also, going back to the question on integrating this in the culture, we have a guide specifically on integrating DEI into the employee life cycle. So it's going to give you some tangible practices that you can take back to your org to really drive DEI systemically. Thank you for being here. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Give us some feedback. We will be sending a recording out. So don't worry if you were just really dialed in, you want to go back and re-listen, we'll make sure we get that over to you. And before we close out, Natalie, any last words? And also let us know how we can get in touch with you. I've already talked about her Instagram, so please follow her on IG right now.
I guess closing words for me are that, to your point, the worst behavior that we accept, but also reward, but also just to let everybody know that oftentimes the devil's in the details, or in the South, I say, the proof is in the pudding. What outcomes are coming out? We can say we're doing all of these things, and we can tell ourselves we're doing a good job being an inclusive leader, but at the end of the day, look at what's coming out of the work. What's in the pudding? Who's getting promoted? Who's getting hired? Who's having great performance reviews? Who's getting overlooked and marginalized? It's not just about going to great educational opportunities once a month and calling yourself an inclusive leader and putting a star on your homework. It's about what systemic outcomes are coming out from you learning these behaviors. Are you putting them into action? And those inclusion results comes from the small things we do every single day. So thank you so much, Latesha, for having me. And you can contact me at any time, on Instagram, Natalie Neilson Edwards. Just look me up. I come right up. And I'm going to try to be better at LinkedIn. So say hi to me there too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You are amazing. And I know I'm feeling really inspired. So I appreciate you for taking the time to have this discussion with me.
And likewise, Latesha, thank you for being an incredible leader that helps us all be better every day. Your work at Perfeqta is phenomenal. And the pleasure has been all mine. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day. Take care.
Bye.